Hey, everybody. The Seattle Seahawks are coming off a Super Bowl championship, and there are many reasons to point to as to what helped get them there. One of them is the unity that formed within this team between players and coaches over the last couple of years. And that bond was led in part by their chaplain, Jonathan Rainey. Today, Jonathan takes us through their Super Bowl run from his perspective and what it's like on the inside as he mentors and pastors this team. We talk about identity, gratitude, and the balance that comes from loving others while playing a violent sport. You don't have to be an NFL player or a Christian to appreciate this conversation as we sit down with Seahawks chaplain Jonathan Rainey. Chaplain of the Seattle Seahawks, but now it's the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, right? We gotta throw that in. Jonathan, thanks for being here. Um, I want to start there, man. Can we talk about the Super Bowl experience? And I don't know if you've been to one before, but let's get your take on that scene first of all.
Super Bowl was amazing. No, I've never been to one, so it was my first. It was a surreal experience. I mean, you got the whole world watching you, and so it was crazy the amount of security and just the process and the interviews and everything, and just trying to keep the guys level-headed, focused, and calm to let them know it's still football.
Mhm.
But it was an amazing experience, world class. Everything they did from the production to the media to the practices, it was just amazing. It was a long 2 weeks. And so when we
Yeah.
got to the game, we were excited to get to the game and play ball, but it was a surreal moment.
Now you will host chapel, obviously on Sundays. You walk me through it, but I'm assuming on Sundays because these guys play on Sundays. So you have whoever wants to attend that, players and coaches. How
hmm
many times during Super Bowl week did you meet with players, coaches as a group versus individual type of interactions?
So we have a coach's Bible study and a player Bible study, and then we have chapel the night before. So some teams do chapel the day of the game.
Uh-huh.
Mike wanted to do it the night before, and Coach Carroll used to do it the night
Uh-huh.
before as well. And so we had chapel the night before because Sunday. Game day is the day the guys lock in. They
Yeah.
kind of go through their mental focus and they just kind of go through their routine to get ready for the game, whether it's through hydration, eating, the whole 9 yards. And so that week, we actually had 4 meetings actually 5 if you include chapel, those 2 weeks outside of that we actually got together as a group. And it was such a amazing, fun time to get with those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the Saturday night makes a lot of sense because you can really focus, right? Versus game day. So the biggest game of their lives. Can you share what your message was the night before the game, and was it different than other games?
Well, the message. So we did the stories in the life of Jesus in our chapel message, and we talked about how Jesus he finished his task. And if you heard me pray about it after the Super Bowl run and win, Mike wanted to ask me to pray, and
Uh-huh.
Jesus used this word to tell us that it is finished. And so we prayed
Mm,
about finishing
yeah.
the task, and it's one thing to get there, but it's another thing to finish, and kind of making those connections of finishing everything we do with excellence, being a great husband, being a great father, being a great citizen, being a great teammate, being a great man. God just don't want to bring you to it. He wants you to finish it. And so he wants us to do it well. And so that was kind of the connection and the tie. And it just fit in well with the Super Bowl message that, hey, we made it here by God's grace and his mercy. Let's finish the task and let's go the whole mile and finish it well, because that's what he requires of us, is to do everything with excellence. And whether we won or lost, we wanted to do everything well and finish this season out the right way. And we actually ended up winning the game. So praise
Yeah.
God and dominating at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it is such a stressful situation for some
Yes.
players, right? They got to manage that. And some will, lean into their faith, of course, to do that. How does one's faith help in those stressful situations, which obviously applies to all of us, right? Not just football players, but that's a
Mhm.
very intense, stressful situation. So how are you advising pastoring young men, to use their faith to navigate that?
Well, the thing about it is that the thing that I teach them is that football is what you do, is not who you are. Who you are is who you're always going to be for a lifetime. You will never play football for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
Father Time catches up with all of our guys. And so the one thing that I want them to do is stay grounded in who they are and their identity and play from it, not for it. Play from a place of peace, not for peace, and play from a place of identity and not for our identity. And so this is a small window of their lives. It doesn't define their lives. It's a window and a season of time in their lives. And to remind them they get to maximize this and squeeze it for everything it's worth, and to really go out there and have fun. As a Bible believing Christian, Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, do it unto the Lord, not unto men." And we are to do it fully unto God. And so, one of the particularly the ways that, and when I pray before the game, is that we get the opportunity to go worship God with the sport of football. We get to
Mhm.
use our gift, talents, and abilities to move our big, beautiful bodies with strong muscles to go out there and push on men, tackle people, and do what we do to worship God with our gift, talents, and abilities. And really just put it in those terms and in that perspective, it helps those guys to stay grounded because it's a pressurized business. I mean, constantly being evaluated, constant
Yeah.
pressure, the media scrutiny, you miss a play, social media, and all that type of deal. There's this pressure that is there, and we want to acknowledge that pressure, but we want to go to the greater pressure. Or I call it the greater truth. The truth is there's pressure in this profession, but the greater truth is that God is God over that pressure, and He still wants us to function with who He's called us to be in that space. And
Yeah.
so, just encouraging those guys to remember their why and to
Mhm.
remember who they play for. They play for God. And so we have a thing called pray up, show up, and point up. And
Mm.
so we pray, we show up to work, and we point people up towards God, not necessarily with our words, but with our actions. And
Yeah.
one of our slogans this year, and my grandmother shared this with me when I was a child. She says, "Jonathan, let the tongue in your shoe speak way louder than the tongue in your mouth." And
Mm.
so we want our walk, people should see our walk and say, "There's something different about those guys. They have a life that is worth emulating." And so it's just reminding them who they are in the gospel and who they are in Christ.
Yeah. And, it goes to identity, which is what you were talking about, right? And I mean,
Yes, sir.
it's not just football players, that's all of us, right? And I mean,
Businessmen.
we're
Yeah.
right? We get caught
Yeah.
up in identity. What do people think about us? And I think that faith, if you can be grounded in that, I mean, I talked to John Kitna about this. I mean, he's so great about this and talking about his life, but it's almost like a superpower.
Yeah.
If you can harness that, you can use it to navigate, and affect other lives.
It is. It is the greatest gift I feel like we've given us. It's our unfair advantage as people who believe and people who are faith and have faith, is that we have this unfair advantage of this grounding and this identity that we don't have to work for. We don't have to earn. It's been freely given to us. And all we have to do is operate in how God wants us to operate. And for me, it's incredibly liberating and freeing just to operate from that space and teaching other men and other women, whether you're in business, whether you're in government, whether you're in ministry, whether you're in football, whatever it may be, that God wants us to operate in the same peace. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how you got here. I mean, because it didn't start at the Super Bowl. I mean, I think it started
Nope.
with your grandparents being pastors, man. I don't know if you
Yep.
were destined to be, a pastor and a chaplain, but it goes way back. What was the earliest influences for you? And just kind of walk us through, because you had your own football journey, and how did
Yes.
football and faith, mesh together for you?
Well, I'll say this: I did not want to be a pastor. It's the last thing I
Mm,
wanted to be because
mm,
both of my grandparents' fathers were pastors. They met each other in seminary, and my mom's dad married my dad's my grandmother and my grandfather, and they became best friends from seminary, and just great men of faith. They were my
Mm,
heroes. They
mm.
pastored 3 churches at the same time for 65 years in the state
Wow.
of Mississippi where I'm from. And so, crazy thing about it is my grandfather on my dad's side is biracial. So he was half black, half white, born in 1909.
Wow.
Imagine that life during
Yeah.
Jim Crow and segregation,
Yeah.
and who's a man who walked that kind of road. And so they were a great influence on my life, but they influenced me in a way that I saw how poor they were, and I said, I do not want to be a minister. And so I actually went to Morehouse College
Mm,
and double major in pre-med and accounting, and I
mm,
had a minor in French. And I was going to either be an accountant, a CPA, or I was going to be a neonatologist or
mm,
a premature baby doctor, not a pastor. And so I get to my 4th year in school, playing football in Morehouse, and I have this opportunity to go to Brazil of all places and do a mission trip and spend the summer in Brazil doing mission work with kids and training with my teammates. And so we were in these slums in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, and we go into this slum, and this kid who he was dying. He was 5 years old, and I looked at this kid, and he had this crust around his eye, and I'll never forget this scene. His his mom, I said, "What happened to his eye?" She said, "Well, in the rainy season, um, some people sleep with their eyes barely open. Uh, the mosquitoes would lay eggs in his eyes, and
Oh,
he
man.
lost his sight." And I go in there, and I might get emotional thinking about it because just I could see this kid's face.
Yeah.
Um, I go in there, and I'm with my friend Flavio, who's there translating, and we're there in these favelas, just handing out blankets, doing mercy ministry, hopefully having the opportunity to share the gospel with these people and just to serve them, if anything, and give them some relief. And by God's Spirit, he just encouraged me to just say, I said, "Hey, uh, I want to let you know, son, that you will see again in heaven." And I said, "Do you want to receive Jesus in your life?" And Flavio's my friend is translating. He's a
Mm,
Brazilian guy who I was partnered
mhm,
with, and Flavio's speaking to him in Portuguese, and this little kid says, "Sim," and his mother looks like, and I said, I knew that meant yes,
mhm.
and so his mom starts crying. She says, "Well, he hadn't spoken in 3 months,"
Wow.
and so I lead this kid in a prayer of salvation. He starts crying, and the
Mm,
tears were painful just because of the
mm,
things that happened in his eyes. And I kinda lost at that moment because, growing up in Mississippi and seeing my grandparents struggle, um, you know, I felt like, I was focusing on the wrong things. And I don't know if you ever had an encounter with God where you hear from God, like, you
mm,
hear this it's not an audible voice that, like, what you see in the movies or in
mhm,
cartoons where it's like clouds that speaks, but I
mm,
heard it in my heart. And Greg, I actually lost it. I heard God speak. He says, "You're so focused on making dollars. I want you to focus on making change."
mhm,
And that rung in my spirit. And I'm just outside of this house. I'm just like crying, crying, crying. And God speaks to me. And I knew what he meant by that, that
mm,
money had become my idol and God had called me into ministry. And the reason I knew that is because when I became a Christian, my mom led me to the Lord. And my mom had a dream. She says, "Son, I saw you preaching to thousands." And I said, that sounds more like a nightmare, mom, because I did not want to be like my grandparents. And she said, "No,
Yeah.
I saw you preaching." And
She has a
she says,
vision. She has a
she had a
vision, you're
vision. Yeah, she
saying?
had a
Yeah.
vision. Yeah. And so she got this vision in her dream. And she says, "I
Yeah.
saw you preaching." And so I'm like, yeah, that's not me. And I go home. I go back to our place we're staying, and I phone home. And this phone call probably cost me $7 for 3 minutes because it was a long distance from
Yeah.
country to country. And I tell my mom that. She says, "I told you when you were
Yeah.
9 that God had called you to be in ministry." And from that day on, um, I knew God had called me into ministry. But what made me focus with sports ministry and not necessarily going to the pastoral route and
Mm,
pastoring a church per se was there in Brazil. The one language that everybody spoke was sports.
mhm.
We would literally take soccer balls out and basketballs, and we would roll these soccer balls out, and we would meet all these street kids that would
Yeah.
sniff glue to curb their hunger pains, and
Yeah.
and we would just minister to them, give them food, uh, and that summer we led 68 of them to the Lord. and it was all because of a soccer ball.
Mhm.
And this was in 2002. It's my going to my senior year in college, and in 2002, I don't know if you know this, but Brazil won the World Cup,
Oh,
and I
right.
saw the whole country shut down. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, man, like this is crazy, and it
Yeah.
was amazing. And so I knew at that moment when I finished my senior year, I got my 2 degrees that God had called me into ministry, and specifically the sports ministry. And my mentor, who was my chaplain, who mentored me, took a job at Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, there
Mhm.
with Chan Gailey. He says, I want you to come work with me. And so
Mm.
that's kind of how I started my journey as a chaplain straight out of college. And
Yeah.
this will be my 23rd season in being a chaplain.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. So Georgia, let's see, Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, UW,
Yes, sir.
Seahawks. Along the way, I think some of those were, assistant chaplain and maybe part time. So, what, you know, even with strong faith, I'm sure it was
Hmm.
hard at times and you're full time now. I know that, but
Yes.
was it hard at times? Like, was it like struggling to make ends meet? Because,
Yes.
some have more resources than others in these teams, right? So just walk us through what it was like kind of building that foundation for yourself as a chaplain.
Yeah, so, at Georgia Tech, my first year, I came on as an intern living in Atlanta. I made $14,000
Yeah.
and I would
That's what I'm
take on
talking
his
about. Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
$14,000 a whole year, and
Yeah.
my take home pay, I remember, was $1,080, and so it was $14,400. It was $1,200 a month for
Yeah.
12 months, and I would take home $1,080, and my
Yeah.
rent was $720. And I was like, how am I going to make it? So what ended up happening is that I would do speaking engagements. I would do anything I can to kind of just hustle and pay my bills. And what happened is that, for some reason, I know it was God. People started to hear about my ministry, and they just started supporting me. So I would get like
Mhm.
$500 checks in the mail. There's
Mhm.
a couple of businessmen who my dad knew in Mississippi said, "Hey, I want to buy you guys. I want to buy you. Heard about what you're doing. I want to buy you furniture." Another businessman said, "Hey, I want to pay your rent for the next 3 months."
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that's kind of how I made it, by the gifts of others. And I
Mhm.
just want to share this with your audience, is that support those missionaries,
Yeah.
because God has called them to a work that's very unique. And they can't do that work without people supporting them. And
Yeah.
so that was my journey through Georgia Tech, and I came on full time. I was working with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at that time, and you had
Mhm.
to raise all your support. And then I went to Ole Miss, and had a little bit more support, but still was speaking and supplementing my income. And moved here. I met my wife. My wife is from the Seattle area, Tacoma area, and moved here in 2009, and started working with UW in 2010,
Mhm.
because my coach at Ole Miss knew Coach Sark and Coach Carroll when he
Uh-huh.
worked with them at USC. And my coach at Ole Miss was Ed Orgeron,
Uh-huh.
and Ed was able to bridge the gap along with Jeff Mills and others, coaches who were on that staff. And so I was with University of Washington from 2010 until basically the national championship game, which we lost to Michigan. That
Yeah.
was my last game when Caitlin DeBoer goes to Alabama.
Yeah.
That week was a hard week. I was here. I started with the Seahawks in 2015 volunteering, and Coach Carroll allowed me and Pastor Judah Smith to co-chapel together,
Mhm.
and we did that for several years, basically until 2020 when Judah 2019 when Judah moved to LA, and he would come back every weekend and kind of do chapels, and I would do the rest of the throughout the week
Mhm.
ministry Monday through Friday, and Judah would handle the chapel messages on Saturday night, and I would travel with the Huskies. And it was hard sledding, because constantly raising support, constantly speaking. I have a counseling background, so I would do
Mhm.
counseling,
Mhm.
just to serve people. So any way I made money, one of the commitments I made to God is that it's going to be through serving others. It's going to be
Yeah.
through kingdom building and serving others. And so that's kind of how I made it. And it was very hard. And this was coming on full time with Mike, Coach McDonald, which I'm so thankful for him. This was the first time that I've had a full time paying job through an organization
Yeah.
where there was no support. raising in
How
place.
common is that? Did you know? I mean, I'm sure you know other chaplains, but full time chaplain with one pro team, is that very common?
It's only 7 of us in the whole NFL.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
other 25 race support or local pastors who volunteer and serve as I did in that kind of capacity with the team. And every team is different. And the head coaches are different, but um, shout out to John Harbaugh
Hmm.
and the Harbaughs. They kind of trained Mike in the way he was bought in
Yeah.
that Baltimore Ravens system, and
Mm.
the Ravens were one of the first, I think, 3 or 4 organizations that actually had a full-time chaplain on staff called an organizational pastor, which I am here with the Seahawks.
Yeah. Well, you think
Yeah.
about the way Mike McDonald coaches and the buy-in and the unity, and we can talk about, look, not every player is coming to chapel, right?
Hmm.
Not everyone's, it's not everyone's deal, but I'm certain that that brings people together, that only helps personally, professionally. It helps. What is your role? We talk about chapel, you talk to guys on Saturday night, but if you're full time, you have an office, do guys pop in? I mean, you do some counseling. I mean, these are young
Yes.
men that we forget. These are young men that some of them may not have a male role model, in their
Hmm.
lives. And I'm sure you're counseling and serving that purpose in many ways.
Yeah, so my role is I tell people I'm a walking pastor. And so
Mm,
my chief role is just to be here to serve these guys and to meet their needs, whether they believe what I believe or don't, and to to help them and come alongside them and assist them in their journey, their matriculation through the NFL. Being that it's such a performance based business, it is a unique. How do I say this? It's a unique space to operate in. So I have
yeah,
pastors that tell me, it's like, Jay, what do you do? I said, I do all the things that you guys do, counseling, with marriages, parenting, helping guys
mm,
with anxiety, helping with injuries, career
mm,
uncertainty, grief. And we had 4 guys who lost their parents, lost
wow.
family members during the season,
Yeah.
and just kind of being there to help those with identity struggles, success, failure, even transitions when guys get hurt. One of the closest guys who I'm closest to, former Seahawk, was Cliff Averill. And I remember
Yeah.
Cliff, I remember the game that he hurt his neck,
Yeah.
and they were shocked that he was still able to walk. And so, just being there to help him through that transition of what does life look outside of football. And Cliff and Doug and Jermaine and some of those other guys, we all get together once a month and still do
Yeah.
discipleship and meet once
Yeah.
a month. And so, yeah, there's Bible studies, there's chapel services, prayer, counseling, hospital visits, crisis moments, all those things. I meet with the wives and the girlfriends and help them process all that. But basically it's just being someone who is present and trustworthy. One of the things that I've always used in my role from Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, Washington to here is my pastoral privilege. Like I have this opportunity to
Mm,
be a go-between between the coaches and the athletes where I can be a safe space where they can share their fears, their anxieties,
mhm,
just their hearts. And Mike knows this, and every coach I work with is like, "Hey, I will not violate that trust with our
mhm,
guys. I
mhm,
want to be a safe haven. I want to be a
mhm.
safe space. I want to be a safe harbor for these guys. Their life is rocky enough,
Yeah.
with trying to perform, but I want to be a safe harbor with these guys that basically I can care for their soul and do some soul care for them. And the thing that I know all the coaches saw is that when guys' souls were better, they actually end up being better people and they play better
Yeah.
because for me, my philosophy is everything affects everything. You've
Mm,
seen it in business. When a guy's marriage is not doing well, his
yeah.
business typically struggles. And
Yeah,
so,
you're right.
it's when things are going at home, bad at home with his kids, it shows up in work. It shows
Yeah.
up in pretty much everything. And so one of the roles that I have is I want these guys to find me as a safe space where I can help meet those needs that they can flourish and become the men that God's called them to be, whether they are Christian or non-Christian, that they can reach their full potential and maximize this short career that they have as a player. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Let's talk about that Cliff Averill example because we were talking about identity before, and
Hmm.
right, Cliff his career is over in an instant, one play, like
Yes.
neck injury, right? You
Mhm.
know the career is gonna end at some point, but it was over. You can't play anymore. It's too risky. His
Yeah.
identity as a football player. He's been talking to you along the way and I'm assuming diving into his faith. Just walk us through that. Like, I don't know what I guess what I'm thinking is the difference between having that or not having that for him at that moment to have already thought about his identity and hopefully that helped that process as hard as it is.
Yeah. So this is the thing, like, and this is how I shared it with Cliff and pretty much all of our guys. Faith gives you a place to process. It gives you a place to process the pressure in an honest, authentic way. People see the fame and the money and they see all these things, but they don't understand the emotional toll that comes with, being injured, having your career cut short just like that. The process of the grief that you go through, how this affects your family, not only your family, but the people in your extended family
Yeah.
who are depending on you, even your own emotions, your goals. One of the things I know Cliff processed through is that he wanted to get 100 sacks. And that's a
Mhm.
goal that he wanted to get to. And it was such an amazing goal. And we had to process through that. And so it gives them a space that they can slow down and basically quiet their mind
Mhm.
and really seek God and seek inner peace and really become community where, we can process these things together. And so the thing about it is that being a believer, believing in scripture, faith doesn't remove the pressure. It just helps us carry it differently.
Mhm.
And so, and one of the things that I work with a lot of guys is like point of focus. In counseling, the thing that you focus on is the thing you're gonna see. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but like if you focus on negativity, you will see negativity. If you
Yeah.
focus on, hey, my career's done, that's what your brain is gonna just flood your the neurochemicals in your body with. And so point of focus. And so the subtle shift that I wanted Cliff to understand is that, hey, you are the 1% of the 1%. You did what very few people have ever done. You played
Mm.
in the NFL, not just made the NFL, you did it at a high level and you won a Super Bowl. You
Mm.
are one of the best defenses of all time.
Mm.
And I said, that is nothing to sneeze at. Like, point of focus, like, God allowed you to do what very few people will ever get the opportunity to do. And though we we see the grief and we feel the grief and we acknowledge it, the greater truth there is this, is that you're a one percenter. And get this, you were never destined to only be a football player.
Right.
What's your next act?
Yeah.
And focusing on that next act. And Cliff's next act was continue to being a great father, great husband, but really balling out in real estate. And he's done that at such a high level. And when I talk about Cliff's story, I get so emotional because
Yeah.
I've seen the transition and I've seen how God has used that. And he gets this joy to come back and influence our younger guys.
Mhm.
And really for me, that's the joy is when like, I want to be the old chaplain who walks in here and there's 4 or 5 waves of guys who can come back and speak to the younger guys.
Yeah.
And it won't be the theoretical experience. It'll be the practical example
Yeah.
that they can see in this man's life. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so that's kind of how I think faith for me, it helps them process and see the bigger picture and see what God really has designed them to do and really help them process that grief and move towards the next act.
Yeah. When I hear you describe that, I'm thinking about gratitude.
Mm.
There's an element certainly of gratitude and not letting that pass, right?
Yes. It's funny you say that because that's the one thing that we talked about the reticular activating system. Gratitude actually activates that in the mind.
Mhm.
Are we grateful for those things? And Cliff would do a gratitude journal. It's one of our exercises
Mm.
for a couple of months, and it shifted his perspective.
Yeah.
And yes, so having that gratitude, yes, sir.
Yeah. And look, again, it applies. You don't have to be an NFL player to have a gratitude
That's right.
journal. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Right?
I
Right.
every morning I get up and I'm thankful, and it
Yeah.
kind of recenters and resets my day.
Yeah. So you've worked in college locker rooms, NFL locker rooms. Is there a difference between, pastoring, college athlete versus a pro athlete?
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
Really?
So
Yeah,
college,
maturity or what are
so
we what?
well, it's maturity. It's becoming less of a difference, but there's still a difference because in the pro locker room, and it's psychological on you, the male brain fully develops at 25.
Mhm.
So these guys are still developing in the college locker room, and even through their first contract in most cases, unless you
Yeah.
got that COVID year, some guys are like 25.
Yeah,
Hello
yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah,
you know,
right, right.
It's like, it's like,
Yeah.
how did Indiana come so good? They have 24 and 25-year-olds playing
Yeah,
against 18,
right.
19-year-olds.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, Coach Signetti did a great job.
sure.
But the difference in the locker room is definitely there. College guys are still developing into men in a lot of ways. NFL locker room is full of grown men who
Mm.
carry family expectations, financials, business, leadership, public expectations. They have all these different expectations that they have been grounded in the NFL locker room. And the NFL locker room is way more mature. You're expected to be a professional. College locker room, you're expected to be a professional, but there's more grace.
Mhm.
Missing me in the NFL locker room, I think the fine is like $5,000. Be late for
Yeah.
one. And if you
Wow.
late for two,
It's a real
it's like
deal.
15. If you're late for
Yeah.
three, you're $40,000. So that doesn't happen in college. And so, and the other thing that I see is that college players are chasing the dream of getting to the NFL.
Yeah.
NFL guys are trying to sustain the dream,
Yeah.
and they're navigating through the pressures that few people understand. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the difference that I've seen between the college locker room and the pro locker room. It's funny because Coach Chris Peterson asked me that when I first started working here. He said, "Jay Ray, how is it over there with the pros?" I said, "Coach." I said, we got some dogs. We got Vita Bea, Buda Baker, and all these guys
Yeah.
in our locker room. I said, but they're all alphas over there.
Yeah.
All of them.
All of them.
All of them are apex predators.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
all want to eat. And so,
Yeah.
the difference is that you got alpha minded males who are the high of the highest in their profession, and they're all trying to take a piece of the pie. And yet, the beautiful thing about it is that coaches have to make it all work together.
Yeah. And
And
you
so,
have
yeah.
to
So,
make it work. So how do
yes.
you pastor differently than in those two different settings?
Yeah. So in the college setting, it's more like, so the thing that's consistent is that I want to keep the same messaging, like the same messaging as the coach, but how that messaging is conveyed in a college setting versus a professional setting is totally different because of
Mm.
the mindset. It's because of the
Mhm.
perspective, because of the maturity. And
Mm.
so, um, when I interview for Mike, one of the things I always say, and it's weird, like guys interview me, but the way I look at it for businessmen, you should interview the people who are interviewing you
Mm. Mhm.
because they have a title to mean you want to work for them.
That's who you're
And
gonna be
so
working for. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I'm interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
so one of the things I told Mike, I said, I want to fit my skill set into your vision.
Mm.
And so the vision that the head coach has, I want to make sure that comes to life. And how I do that is just different with the different maturity levels within the two programs. And so when I was with UW and I would be there, I could do the same chapel message, some of the same leadership principles, and they would apply differently than I would do them here. And so it's just more of anything, knowing my audience and really customizing it for what they are going through in both contexts. And I want to say this for the leaders who are out there. You have to be present in order to speak properly and speak proper purpose into your people. And so you got to be present. So principles work, but they work effectively when they're put in the context that and you've seen and you've actually been in. And so being around the locker room, being around the facility, being around both of them, I know the strengths, weaknesses. I know the character, the nature. I know the gaps. I know the blind spots. And so I can speak into that. And so that's why I think the proximity principle is so important. You got to
Mhm.
be around the people. You
Yeah.
got to be around it. You just can't show up and share a message, but the message, preaching and teaching is probably 5% of what I do. The other 95% is relationships, listening, which I think is a lost art.
Yeah.
Really listening and observing what's going on around you, and you can speak into it. And so that's kind of how I would say the differences are.
Yeah. So, you talked about the alpha males, right? Which I think we
Hmm.
all get. And some people may struggle with understanding this dichotomy between a violent sport, alpha
Yeah.
males, and, we're talking about loving our brothers too. Like all
Yes.
these things coexist in football. Your job is to help them coexist. And
Yes.
so, how do you blend those two things together? A violent sport with, you know, love and faith at the same time.
It's funny you say that. Our prayer every game is that is to be obedient to, I think, the fourth command, the third command that God has told us. He says, "Be fruitful and multiply, have dominions," the third command, and then
Mhm,
subdue the earth. And so our prayer with our team is that we would be obedient to what God originally commanded Adam and Eve, is that we want to have dominion where we go. And we want to subdue the places to where we go. People are like, whoa, that's kind of a crazy language, Pastor. Actually, no, it's biblical language that we
mhm.
use. And we want to be gracious, loving, but excellent in what we do. And so what I mean by that is that um, how do we love? So I explain love for our guys is that love is not soft.
Mhm,
It can be, but it's not only soft.
mm,
Love is passionate. Like love from the gospel perspective is God horrifically punishing Jesus because he loved me.
mhm,
And we get to operate in that same kind of radical agape love, that unconditional surrender and that unconditional love. We get to do that in football. And so they coalesce and they coexist in football because we get to honor God with this beautiful sport that we get to play. And we show God how much faith we have in him, how much we love him by how we honor him with the gifts and talents and abilities that he's given us and how we operate within the game. And so there's a way we can play this violent sport and we can hit and we can do it in a legal way. We can tackle and catch and we can be physical in a way that is honoring to God in a legal way that also displays love to not only our teammate
mhm,
but our friend. And so in our opponent. And so one of the things that I encourage our guys to do is, you know, when you walk into this building, and this is kind of Mike's messaging, and I've kind of taken it to another level. It's like, hey, we're always going to be family. And the one thing you do is you protect family.
mhm,
Like you protect your brothers, you protect your sister, you protect your family. And
mhm,
so as a result of that, what are you willing to do to protect your family? And at the end of every chapel, we have one of our guys pray. And one of the things I want our guys to do, and this is something I've done since Ole Miss, Georgia Tech, for 22 years I've done in ministry, is that I have guys find 5 men, and I would tell them and give them a hug and say, "I love you and I appreciate you."
mhm,
And so you loved and appreciate it. Um, and Les was like, "Why you have guys do that?" It's like kind of weird for some guys. I said, "Well, this is the thing. The way you break down barriers is that you have to verbally say it, and
mhm,
then touch actually solidifies that."
mhm,
And I
mhm,
said, they may do it as a practice, but then watch what happens. And by the end of the season, particularly that first season where we went 10-7 and missed the playoffs, like guys really begin to love each other
mhm,
and really begin to play for each other because that touch and that affirmation affirmed it in their brain. And they had experiences they'd gone through. It just solidified it in their being that, hey, I'm with this person. I've learned about them. And one of the things that coach did this year, we had these things called walk and talks,
mhm,
and guys got to know each other and couple that with the love and appreciation. And man, the one thing that our team is known for across the league, and other chaplains have told me this, and I think Jared Verse came out and said it on his little podcast. He says, "Hey," he says, "I started to get up on one of the old linemen's face. All 5 of them came up on me."
mhm,
And there's
mhm,
a love that's developed with these guys that they're going to have each other's back, and we're going to do things violently. we're gonna do things physically, but we're gonna do things within the rule book that honors and glorifies God. And so
Mhm.
we're gonna glorify God with our body. That's kind of how
Yeah.
they coexist for me, and that's how we
So
teach it.
let's see, you're doing this 23 years, 20 plus years. What describe this locker room? Was it different? What was this group of guys different? There's a lot of things that go into winning a Super Bowl, but when you look at this locker room, this coaching staff, how they coexisted together, was there a difference from other teams that you've seen?
Yes, and uh, this locker room was one of the most connected that I've ever been around,
Mm,
and you could see it. Like guys play for each other, they loved each other, and so the connection was real. The thing that I think was amazing also is that it is rare in the NFL to have a team with such low ego. I think ego and pride have ruined most people. I
mhm.
mean, it was just yeah. So one thing I could say kicked out of heaven was
Yeah,
pride and ego,
yeah,
and so when you have a head coach who doesn't care who gets the credit, who and that permeates through a team. Like he's working just as hard as the OC and DC adding dirty, and he has very low ego. Like he didn't make it all about me. Like Mike's the type that now I think he has to adjust to actually people knowing who he is,
yeah,
and Mike's such a low key, humble dude. I mean, he's a hard worker. He's a killer now. Don't get it twisted. Like
yeah,
he's
yes,
he's trying his best to like be the best coach he can be, but he's such a humble, hardworking guy. And that's one of the things that made me want to work with him. And is because the lack of ego. So the love, the connection, the low ego, and it takes talent. I mean, we have talented, young, talented players, and you have to do it. And we have a leader in Sam who epitomizes all of that.
yeah,
And Sam, I mean, he's not too high, don't get too low. He threw 4 picks and we were still in the game and we
mhm,
probably could have beat the Rams. And
mhm,
he has the game of his life in the NFC Championship game, and he's the same guy.
mhm,
That's the thing that is so great about this team is that in the key positions, all those things collided, and that's what we have. And my prayer is we can hold on it for as long as we can,
yeah,
and let that be a permanent part of who we are.
yeah,
That's the goal. Yeah.
yeah. So your locker room, any locker room is diverse, right? Social, economical, different religious backgrounds. Some guys are not religious at all. And
Yes.
so do you have to navigate that? Like some guys aren't into it. Some guys don't want to
Yeah.
hear it, right? And so I'm just wondering if that's an element in 23 years, how you deal with that.
Yeah, so the beautiful part about it is that the locker room is diverse. Like I don't see it as a negative thing. And I know you're
Uh-huh.
not asking that question from that
Uh-huh.
perspective.
Uh-huh.
I love that it's different faiths, different backgrounds, the whole 9 yards, because it creates a beautiful picture of what we can be when we truly love each other. And so my seminary professor used to say this all the time. He says, Jonathan, if you remember anything in ministry, anything in life, anything in your parenting, in your marriage, in business, wherever God sends you, remember 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. You got to have love. Love is the key ingredient.
Hmm.
He says you can be able to know all the mysteries, but you don't have love. You can have all the faith in the world, move mountains, but if you don't have love, you're nothing. And he says love is the one thing that no person can really reject. And
Mhm.
so in this locker room, yeah, there are people who believe different things, but this is the thing they know the most, that we love them. And they
Mhm.
love us and we love them. Like whether you believe in whatever you believe, I love you, and I'm gonna show you how I love you. Not just with my lips, but with my feet. I'm gonna show
Uh-huh.
you how
Uh,
I'm gonna show up for you. And so that dynamic has been a blessing because it's just opened up a door for guys to really connect and really get to know each other and hear each other's story, and it's created this beautiful dynamic that I wish we could have in our world today. Because I wish what we have in our locker room could be basically transposed into our
Yeah.
world today,
Yeah.
and our world would be such a better place. And so the key to it is we have this dynamic of love and this foundation of love, and it starts from the head coach all down, all the way down.
Well, I think one way to expand on that outside of the locker room for all of us is mentorship. You know, we have a
Yes.
chance to mentor others, and that's really what you're doing as a pastor, right? And so I think for people, just give them the perspective of how rewarding is it for you, you know, to change lives, to have an impact on people, you know, when you see the effect someone has by the guidance you've given them. I think we can all do that in mentorship, and I'm just wondering if you can expand on what that's meant to you.
It's been amazing when guys, when they get it and it's transferred, when it moves from theory to actually to practice, when it's the most rewarding thing. It is what I kin it to what like Mike talks about his story about when he started coaching high school kids, and he says when a guy got it, he's like, I got the coaching bug. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I got the mentor ministry bug when I see guys get it. And they put the principles into practice, and it changes their lives. They become better people, better versions of themselves. They become the people who God want them to be. And it just like, man, like it brings tears to my eyes. And so um it's incredibly rewarding, but this is the way I look at it, Greg, is that I owe this to God
Mhm.
because he met me in a dark space.
Yeah.
You know, he met me. My mom led me to the Lord when I was younger. Um, but I met Jesus for myself when I was in college. And so, and I know everybody's journey is different, but for me, um, it's amazing kind of what transpired and happened in my life through a mentor. So my mentor, the guy who mentored me, his name is Derek Moore. He is the player development at University of South Carolina now.
Mhm.
And he was the person I went and worked at Georgia Tech with. He was a chaplain there. He played in the NFL, and Derek, met me at one of my low points, and, he challenged me, with this quote, and I'll never forget it. He says, "A man with an experience is never at the disposal of a man with an opinion." And he says, "Jay, your mom led you to God, but have you really experienced him?" And he
Mhm.
just wanted me he says, "I just want you to surrender and just know him for yourself." And as a 19-year-old, we're on this journey of like, I was to the point, Greg, I was studying other faiths. I was Islam, other
Mhm.
things. And he says, "I just want you to study Jesus." Because I was just dealing with some dark stuff in my past. And man, I felt so much grace and so much mercy in his presence. Um, and so I owe this to God because God met me, and he spoke to me, and he still speaks to me. And it's my act of worship of giving it back to him. Like, man, I just want people to experience what I've experienced.
Yeah.
And you don't have to become a Christian to experience what I'm experiencing. What I'm saying is this: I had a man who stepped in my life and spoke life into me, and it changed the trajectory of my life
Mhm.
profoundly. And if I could do that for any of these guys, then I've done what God's called me to do. And it's an incredible joy and privilege, um, to the point where I have friends that they're just in awe of me being in this space. It's like, man, like I mean, like Calvin Johnson was one of my first guys I mentored at Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
It's like, Megatron. Like, I don't see him as Megatron. I see him as a guy we used to play FIFA together. We used to talk about Jesus and talk about
Mhm.
his, girls and his life and all the. We used to just help him process through life, and I just was there to help plant some seeds and give him nuggets. And I never knew that I had that big of an impact on his life until he calls me back and said, "Hey, I want you to come to my camp and speak to our kids in my camp." So
Yeah.
he and AJ Brown and I think and Dominican Sue were all there, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, this is one of my mentors," and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Me?" And so it's like he's like, "Yeah," and so it was amazing to see these see what God did, and my friend's like, "Oh my God, you have relationships with Russell." I'm like, "I don't see it that way." Uh, Like, I think the reason that this is one of my mentors. I'm getting off on the side because I talk a lot, and
Go for it.
I'll pull it back in.
Go
But one of
for
my
it.
mentors said this. He said this. He said, "Jay, I think you're effective because you're not enamored by professional athletes."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I met God, so nothing gets bigger than that. If
Yeah.
I meet President Trump tomorrow, if I meet President Xi in China, whoever,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, no, they're human beings, and and how can I impact them, influence them to be who God's called them to be, and that's really the joy that I get from this is that to see these guys get it.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. You're making a big difference. That you touched on something I wanted to ask you, and
yes,
maybe
sir.
just expand on it a little bit more to the public. They're like the Megatron. Oh, Calvin Johnson, Russell Wilson. But what should people know? What should people know about these professional athletes that we put on a pedestal? And I'm not saying knock them down. I'm just saying, what should we know about these humans, right? These people that you're interacting with that maybe people don't see on a day-to-day basis because they're not in there.
Yeah, these individuals are extraordinary athletes, but they're still human beings. People see the helmets, the contracts, the highlights, but
Mhm.
behind that, they carry real pressures, insecurities, pains, hopes, responsibilities, dreams, struggles. They have families, they have all these things just like you and I. And one of the things that I've learned about being around players for all these years is that some of the strongest people carry a lot of emotional baggage on the inside.
Mhm.
And so just because you have a platform, fame doesn't eliminate humanity. It doesn't eliminate those things. It just
Mm.
magnifies it.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage the general public to know that these players need grace too. They need support. They need truth. They need community. They need to know that they're valued for more than what they produce on the field. Football is
Yeah.
what they do. It's not
Yeah.
who they are. And so,
That's great.
that's the thing that I want them to understand is that, yeah, they're up on a lot of pressure, but they're just human beings. And so, I've always encouraged individuals who I call struggle with empathy is to redefine what empathy is, or I've I've defined empathy this way, and this is one of the practices I do in counseling, uh, and particularly in premarital and marital counseling. It actually helps the significant others and the spouses to understand each other's perspectives. But people will say empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, and that's part of the definition of empathy, but it's not the definition of empathy.
Mhm.
True definition of empathy, as taught by my mentor Tim, which I think is very true. He says, it is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, not as you, but as them with their
Right.
experiences in their past.
Right.
And so imagine yourself being XYZ player with his experiences, his past, his XYZ, and then it will help you understand and relate and really help you be sympathetic of the pressure and the life that they are in. Um, and so these guys are human. They are here today and gone tomorrow. They're just like you and I,
Yeah.
but God has just given them some unique gifts, talents, and abilities as it pertains to their athleticism.
Yeah.
And so I would see them as what they truly were before they got to here and what
Yeah.
they're going to be after they leave the NFL. They're still human beings who need grace, support, mercy, community, and encouragement.
Good stuff. Well, that perspective, it applies to the neighbor, the guy that cuts you off
Yes.
in traffic,
Yes.
the
We all got a
coworker.
story, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We
So,
could use empathy, spread it around.
mhm.
This has been great stuff. I think people have really learned something, I hope, about, what your position does, what a locker room's like, what a community is like. And that can be a locker room, that could be a neighborhood, right? Just the value of that together. And I'll tell you what, I think if this podcast and your summary gets out to 31 general managers, there's going to be 37 full-time, chaplains, not just seven, man, because
That's the
you're
prayer.
proof. You're proof it works, and that it's valuable. And I think the fact that Mike McDonald recognized that, I think that says a lot about, how he approaches it.
Yeah, and I just want to thank him and John. They are such amazing people, and the entire Seahawks organization, from Paul when he was here and with us, to Jody, and now to our whoever our future owner is going to be.
Uh-huh.
Such a world class organization, first class organization, just an amazing group of individuals, and it all starts at the top. And so, um, my prayer is that yes, maybe other teams will see this, and maybe NFL would make this something they would mandate, because I think it's so important that we as human beings are triune in nature. We have body, soul, and spirit.
Mhm.
And that spirit part usually gets left to the side a lot. We deal with the soul, the psyche, and we
Mhm.
deal with the body. But when the spirit is touched, man, it can happen. And my prayer also is that the Seahawks win 5 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, there you go.
So they can say, "Yeah, what are you guys doing?" Well, we invited God into our space, and so
Right on.
now you should too. No.
Right on, right on. Well,
Awesome.
hey, Jonathan, thanks for being here. Do you? I don't know. I know you. I think you have a website, or I saw your website. Do people follow? Are you have a social media presence, or are you just out doing your own thing with the Seahawks?
I do, yeah, my social media, handle is it's kinda funny. They call me Big Play Rainey in college, and that name
Okay.
kinda stuck. So, it's Big Play Rainey, on Instagram and on Twitter. Um, I'm not on it a ton. I kinda
Yeah.
keep my life as private. You just
Yeah.
see pictures of my family, my kids.
Yeah.
But my website, jonathanrainey.com, is being developed. It should be finished this summer, and, if you wanna, uh email me, get with me, just go through that website. Um, yeah, and so, um, I kinda like to keep a low profile, Greg.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
thought you were going to say that. Yeah.
I like to work in the shadows, and if it becomes about me, then I've lost my purpose and lost my
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's never
Well,
about me. It's always about others.
you're out there making a difference, man. And thanks for taking the time to share it, because not everybody does that, because you are kind of working, behind the scenes. But it's been a great perspective, and I think we're better for hearing this today. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share on your platform, and thank you so much for every listener who's listening to this.
All right, be well.